Picture this: America's rise to global power wasn't just built on grand victories like the Louisiana Purchase or the push west. It was forged in gritty, overlooked conflicts that pushed the nation to define its reach. The Utah War, a tense standoff on the home front, the Spanish-American War seen through Cuba's fight for freedom, and the Philippine-American War, a Pacific struggle with lasting echoes. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to What They Teach You in High School. My name is Jay. The stories we're diving into aren't just footnotes. They're the hidden gears of America's empire, turning through control, trade, and big ideas about destiny. Today, we'll dig into the voices and choices that drove these moments, framing them around the Civil War's shadow. Let's get into it. In school, we learned about America's expansion as a story of opportunity and democracy spreading across the continent. But as the nation grew, it faced challenges that required the federal government to assert direct control over distant territories and later to project influence abroad. Before the Civil War, the U.S. focused on securing its western territories to ensure economic growth and connectivity, often overriding local governance to maintain national unity. The Utah War in the late 1850s exemplifies this as the federal government moved to enforce its authority over a territory seen as defiant, securing critical routes and resources for a growing continental empire. The Civil War from 1861 to 1865 was a defining internal struggle over Union and slavery, unifying the nation and setting the stage for a bolder outward expansion. After the war, the Spanish-American and Philippine-American Wars marked America's leap into global power, driven by ambitions to secure trade routes, strategic bases, and ideological influence. These conflicts weren't about negotiating constitutional balances, as territories lacked the sovereignty of states. Instead, they reflect a federal government consolidating power at home and abroad to build an empire. Leaders like James Buchanan, William McKinley, and Theodore Roosevelt articulated visions of expansion rooted in security, progress, and what they believed was their responsibility. But not everyone agreed. Dissenting voices like Mark Twain in the Anti-Imperialist League challenged these moves, arguing they betrayed America's founding ideals. We'll explore the perspectives alongside leaders like Brigham Young, Jose Marti, and Emilio Aguinaldo to show how these conflicts shaped America's path to global influence. Our story begins in the American West during the 1850s, a time of rapid territorial growth following the Mexican-American War. The Mormons, or Latter-day Saints, had migrated to Utah seeking religious freedom and established a community under leader Brigham Young. As federal oversight increased, tensions arose over governance, culture, and practices like polygamy and perceptions of autonomy. In early 1857, reports from federal officials in Utah reached Washington, portraying the Mormons as defiant of U.S. laws. President James Buchanan, influenced by these accounts, decided to appoint a non-Mormon governor without formally notifying Brigham Young. On May 28, 1857, Buchanan appointed Alfred Cumming as the new governor and ordered a military escort of about 2,500 troops, roughly a third of the U.S. Army, to ensure his installation. From the government's perspective, this was about enforcing federal authority in a distant territory, much like the broader sectional tensions brewing across the nation over slavery and states' rights. This action advanced territorial consolidation essential for transcontinental railroads, completed in 1869, which would link Pacific ports to eastern markets, enabling America's emergence as a two-ocean commercial power. Word of the approaching army reached Salt Lake City on July 24, 1857, during Pioneer Day celebrations. Brigham Young, viewing this as potential persecution, similar to past events in Missouri and Illinois, responded by preparing defenses. On September 15, 1857, Young declared martial law in the territory, stating in his proclamation, "We are invaded by a hostile force, who are evidently assailing us to accomplish our overthrow and destruction. The government has not condescended to cause an investigating committee or any authorized officer to come with impartiality to inquire into and correct any illegality where it exists, and to assume a position compatible with their dignity and honor and that which belongs to a Republican government. This move forbade armed forces from entering Utah and mobilized the now Vol Legion, the territorial militia. As U.S. troops under Colonel Albert Sidney Johnston advanced from Fort Leavenworth in July, Mormon strategies focused on delay and harassment rather than direct confrontation. In October 1857, Lot Smith led a raiding party that burned 3 supply trains near Green River, Wyoming, and drove off hundreds of cattle, forcing the army to winter at Fort Bridger under harsh conditions. No major battles occurred, but this guerrilla approach disrupted logistics without significant bloodshed, reinforcing federal determination to secure the West as a stable foundation for national growth. And this is the part they don't tell you about in high school. Amid the tensions, tragic incidents arose. In September 1857, the Mountain Meadows Massacre took place in southern Utah, where a wagon train of about 120 immigrants from Arkansas were attacked. Initially involving local Paiute tribes and escalating due to war hysteria and rumors, Mormon militia members participated in the siege and eventual killing of most adults and older children after promising safe passage. Another incident was the Aiken Party killing in October 1857, when 6 Californians were murdered after being accused of spying. By winter, both parties strengthened positions. Congress authorized more troops for the U.S., while Mormons prepared fortifications. In February 1858, Thomas L. Kane, a non-Mormon friend of the Saints, arrived as a mediator. His efforts, combined with Cummings' arrival in April, led to Brigham Young peacefully stepping down as governor. In March 1858, Young initiated the move south, relocating about 30,000 Mormons from northern settlements to Provo and beyond, preparing to burn homes if necessary, a tactical retreat echoing strategies from other conflicts. Resolution came in June 1858 when Buchanan's peace commissioners arrived with a pardon for past actions. On June 26, Johnston's army marched through a deserted Salt Lake City and established Camp Floyd, 40 miles southwest. The war ended without large-scale fighting, costing the U.S. about $15 million, but demonstrating the challenges of governing remote territories. This resolution strengthened federal authority, paving the way for railroads, mining, and migration that fueled economic growth and connected the West to global trade networks, a critical step in America's imperial framework. With the Utah War resolved, the federal government could redirect its focus to the escalating sectional crisis over slavery, which would erupt into the Civil War in 1861. During the Civil War, Utah remained largely peripheral, with Mormon leaders expressing loyalty to the Union while protecting overland mail routes. But the war's resolution in 1865 unified the nation and paved the way for renewed expansionist ambitions. Emerging from the Civil War in the era of Reconstruction, the United States in the late 19th century turned its gaze outward, seeking new markets and strategic positions amid rapid industrialization. In the Caribbean, the Spanish-American War of 1898 marked a turning point in this shift, advancing imperial ambitions by securing naval bases, protecting trade routes, and expanding economic influence in Latin America. Think back to things like the Monroe Doctrine from episode 1. Cubans had long pursued independence from Spain, enduring conflicts like the 10 Years' War from 1868 to 1878. By the 1890s, under leaders like Jose Marti, the movement gained momentum. Marti wrote, "I have lived in the monster and I know its entrails. My sling is that of David." He emphasized liberty is the right of every man to be honest, to think, and to speak without hypocrisy. Cuba had been fighting for its independence from Spain before the U.S. entered the war. However, after the USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor on February 15, 1898, the U.S. entered as well, amid growing concerns over Spanish policies and strategic interests. The explosion, whose cause remains debated, likely an accident, fueled public outrage through yellow journalism. President William McKinley, initially reluctant, declared war on April 25, 1898, motivated by the desire to eliminate European colonial holdouts near U.S. shores and open Cuban markets to American goods, aligning with broader goals of economic dominance and regional security. U.S. involvement included naval blockades and land campaigns, with key battles like San Juan Hill on July 1st, 1898, where Theodore Roosevelt's Rough Riders gained fame. The naval battle at Santiago de Cuba on July 3rd destroyed the Spanish fleet. Volunteers from Utah, a territory now more integrated post-Civil War, participated in these campaigns, showing how earlier domestic conflicts like the Utah War had evolved into national unity and overseas efforts that established a Caribbean presence for trade and defense. Post-war, the Treaty of Paris on December 10, 1898, ceded control of multiple territories to the U.S., advancing its imperial reach. The United States acquired Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, establishing a network of strategic outposts and economic hubs across the Caribbean and Pacific. The Platt Amendment of 1901, incorporated into Cuba's constitution, allowed U.S. intervention for stability and leased Guantanamo Bay, a key naval base that endures today as a hub for American military projection. Building on the momentum from the Spanish-American War, America's horizons extended further beyond the continent in the wake of the Civil War's unifying effects. Following the Spanish-American War, the U.S. acquired the Philippines, advancing imperial ambitions by securing a strategic foothold in Asia to access Chinese markets. Additionally, the Philippines and its access to Asia allowed America to counter European rivals and spread American values. President William McKinley outlined this approach in his Benevolent Assimilation Proclamation, stating, "The mission of the United States is one of benevolent assimilation, substituting the mild sway of justice and right for arbitrary rule." McKinley believed this would bring stability and progress to the islands, aligning with goals of economic expansion and civilizing missions. However, Filipinos who had been seeking independence from Spain since 1896 under Emilio Aguinaldo viewed the transition differently. They declared the First Philippine Republic on January 23, 1899. Tensions escalated and war broke out on February 4, 1899, when U.S. troops fired on Filipino forces near Manila. The conflict involved initial conventional battles like the Battle of Manila on February 5th, where U.S. forces captured the city. It then shifted to guerrilla warfare as Filipinos adapted to the terrain. U.S. troops, eventually numbering up to 70,000, faced challenges in the jungles and diseases like malaria. Strategies included reconcentration camps to isolate insurgents from civilians, similar to Spanish tactics in Cuba, as part of efforts to establish long-term colonial administration. Key events included the capture of Aguinaldo on March 23, 1901, which weakened resistance, though fighting continued in some areas until 1913. Casualties were significant. Around 4,200 American soldiers and an estimated 20,000 Filipino combatants, with civilian deaths from disease and hardship reaching up to 200,000. Not all Americans supported this venture. The Anti-Imperialist League, formed in 1898 by figures like Mark Twain and Andrew Carnegie, argued that colonial rule betrayed America's founding principles. In his 1901 essay To the Person Sitting in Darkness, Twain satirized McKinley's benevolent assimilation, writing, "And as for a flag for the Philippine province, it is easily managed. We can have a special one. Our states do it. We can have just our usual flag with the white stripes painted black and the stars replaced by the skull and crossbones." Congressional debates raged over whether the Constitution followed the flag, questioning the legality and morality of overseas rules. Theodore Roosevelt, who becomes president in 1901, supported the engagement as part of America's global responsibilities. In his 1899 strenuous life speech, he remarked, "In the West Indies and the Philippines alike, we are confronted by most difficult problems. It is cowardly to shrink from solving them in the proper way, for solved they must be. If not by us, then by some stronger and more manful race." James Bradley's The Imperial Cruise contextualizes this as part of a broader strategy to secure Pacific interests, positioning the U.S. as a Pacific power with bases for naval projection and trade dominance. The war ended formally on July 4, 1902, with U.S. administration established. These conflicts framed around the Civil War reveal how America built its empire through a mix of domestic consolidation and overseas expansion, driven by territorial control, economic access, and ideological outreach. The Utah War secured the West for railroads and trade, while the Spanish-American and Philippine-American Wars established America as a global power with strategic bases and markets, though not without debate and resistance at home. By examining the facts and voices from the time, we gain a deeper understanding of the nation's global role today. If this exploration sparked your interest, like, subscribe, and hit the bell for episode 4. Comment below, what's one aspect of America's expansion that surprised you? Once again, my name is Jay. Thanks as always for watching What They Teach You, Empirical Empires. We will see you guys in the next episode. Talk to you then. Peace out.